They sent 300 soldiers to capture him. He didn't throw a single punch. 2 weeks later, the entire battalion surrendered, and nobody could explain why. The galaxy understands violence. Every species has refined the art of causing harm. Weapons technology advances every year. Combat tactics evolve. Military doctrine gets more sophisticated. But there's another kind of strength that most species never develop. The strength to stand in front of armed enemies and simply refuse to participate in violence. Not from weakness, not from fear, but from a conviction so absolute that the violence becomes irrelevant. Humans call it nonviolent resistance, passive resistance, civil disobedience. Most species call it suicide, until they see it work. This is the story of Brother James Thornton, a human monk who took vows of nonviolence on Earth and carried them to New Tibet colony, where he faced the Caltrian Dominion's elite shock troops with nothing but patience, presence, and an absolutely unshakable refusal to cooperate with oppression. This is the story of how one man defeated 300 soldiers without raising a hand, and changed the way the galaxy thinks about strength. Brother James was meditating when the invasion began. He sat in the lotus position on the meditation platform at New Tibet Monastery, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. He'd been sitting there for 3 hours, his mind clear and focused, his breathing steady. The explosions didn't disturb his meditation. Neither did the sound of ships landing or soldiers shouting orders. He observed these things, acknowledged them, and returned his attention to his breath around him. The other monks maintained their meditation. 23 humans who'd chosen this life of contemplation and nonviolence. Who'd built this monastery 15 years ago as a place of peace in the frontier colonies. The soldiers reached the monastery gates around 07:00 hours. Brother James heard them approaching, heard that a man shouted an accented standard, "Open the gates," by order of the Caltrian Dominion. This territory is now under military occupation. All civilians will comply with occupation protocols. Brother James stood, smoothed his saffron robes, and walked to the gates. The other monks followed. He opened the gates himself. Outside stood approximately 50 Caltrian soldiers, humanoid, reptilian features, heavily armed. Their commander, identified by his rank insignia, stepped forward. "You are the leader here. I am one of the community," Brother James said. "We have no hierarchy in the traditional sense, but I can speak for our monastery. I am Brother James. Brother James, I am Commander Zelkith. As of this moment, New Tibet colony is under Caltrian military control. All civilians must surrender weapons and submit to registration. You will comply immediately." "We have no weapons," Brother James said. "We are a monastery, dedicated to peace and contemplation. You are welcome to search if you wish. We will search. You will all assemble in your courtyard and await processing. We will assemble in our courtyard because it is a pleasant morning, and that is where we would be anyway. But we will not cooperate with military occupation. We recognize no authority but our own conscience and the universal principle of nonviolence." Commander Zelkith stared at him. "You refuse to comply. We refuse to cooperate with violence and oppression. But we will not resist physically. You may do as you believe you must. We will not stop you. If you resist, you will be restrained or eliminated. We will not resist, but neither will we cooperate. There is a difference." Zelkith didn't understand the distinction. He ordered his soldiers to search the monastery while the monks assembled in the courtyard. The soldiers found exactly what Brother James had said. They'd find no weapons, no contraband, just a community of humans living simply, studying philosophy, practicing meditation. "Sir, there's nothing here, just religious materials and basic supplies." "Then they're not a threat. Register them and move on. We have the rest of the colony to secure." That's when the complications began. The registration process was supposed to be simple. Soldiers would record each civilian's identity, assign them identification numbers, establish a record for tracking purposes. Standard military occupation procedure. Brother James was first. He sat calmly while a soldier prepared to scan his biometrics. Name: Brother James Thornton. Identification documents: I carry none. I renounced such attachments when I took my vows. You must have colonial registration. I did once. I chose to relinquish it. My identity is not something that can be captured in a database. The soldier looked confused. You are required to provide identification for registration. I understand that is your requirement. I will not fulfill it. I do not recognize your authority to register me, number me, or track me as if I were property. If you refuse, you will be detained. I understand. I will not resist detention, but I will not cooperate with it either. The soldier looked to Commander Zelkith for guidance. This wasn't a situation covered in their training. The human wasn't resisting, wasn't fighting, just calmly refusing to do what was required. Detain him, Zelkith ordered. We'll process him later. They moved Brother James to a holding area. Tried the next monk. Same result. Calm refusal, no resistance, but no cooperation. All 23 monks responded identically. They wouldn't fight, wouldn't run, but they absolutely wouldn't cooperate with the occupation. By noon, Zelkith had all 23 monks detained and exactly 0 of them registered. This was supposed to take 2 hours. It had taken 5 and accomplished nothing, sir. What do we do with them? Zelkith considered his options. These humans weren't threats, weren't armed, weren't dangerous by any conventional measure, but they were refusing to comply with direct military orders. Keep them detained. No food or water until they cooperate, sir. That's what. They're refusing legal orders during military occupation. There are consequences. The monks were moved to a holding facility. No food, no water, just empty rooms with guards. Brother James sat in his cell and meditated. The other monks did the same. After 6 hours, the guards were getting uncomfortable. These prisoners weren't demanding anything, weren't complaining, just sitting, breathing, existing in a state of calm that was somehow more disturbing than if they'd been screaming. Should we check on them? One guard asked. Make sure they're okay. They're fine. They're just sitting there. That's what's weird. They've been sitting for 6 hours. No movement. No complaints. It's unnatural. After 12 hours, Brother James finally spoke, not to complain, just to address the guard directly. Would you like to learn to meditate? It helps with stress. I notice you seem troubled. The guard stared at him. This prisoner, denied food and water for 12 hours, was offering to teach meditation? I'm not troubled. Your breathing suggests otherwise. You're taking short, rapid breaths. Your shoulders are tense. You're gripping your weapon tightly. These are signs of stress. Meditation can help. I don't need meditation. I need you to cooperate so I can go off duty. I understand. But my cooperation would require me to betray my principles. I cannot do that. So we are both in uncomfortable positions. At least one of us could be more comfortable mentally, though. The offer stands. The guard walked away, disturbed by this conversation. This continued for 3 days. The monks denied food and water, not resisting, not complaining, just sitting, meditating, existing peacefully in conditions designed to break them. On the 3rd day, Commander Zelkith visited the holding facility. You need to eat, he told Brother James. You're going to die. Eventually. Yes, all things die. But I will not die because you deny me food. I will die because I chose not to compromise my principles. There's a difference. You're choosing death over simply providing your name. I'm choosing integrity over collaboration with oppression. If that results in death, so be it. I have lived according to my values. That's enough. Zelkith felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. These humans weren't soldiers, weren't fighters, but they had something he'd never encountered. A kind of strength that didn't come from weapons or training. They were willing to die rather than cooperate, and they were doing it calmly, without anger or fear. That was terrifying in a way violence could never be. Feed them, he ordered, against their will if necessary. I won't have prisoners dying of starvation, sir. They'll refuse to eat, then we force them. The forced feeding didn't go as planned. The soldiers brought food and water, ordered the monks to eat. When Brother James refused, they tried to force it, held him down, tried to make him swallow. James didn't fight, didn't struggle, but he wouldn't swallow. Just let the water and food run back out of his mouth. Not aggressively, not dramatically, just a passive refusal to let his body process what he hadn't consented to. This is impossible, the soldier said. I can't force someone to eat if they won't swallow. Then let them starve, sir. They're going to die, and when they do, this becomes a massacre. Prisoners dying in our custody. That's going to have political consequences. Zelkith realized he was trapped. He couldn't let them die, but he couldn't force them to cooperate. They weren't giving him a military problem to solve. They were giving him a moral problem, and those were much harder. Release them. Back to their monastery. Under guard, the monks returned to their monastery, not because they cooperated, but because Zelkith had no other option. Brother James bowed to the commander as he left. Thank you for your compassion. This isn't compassion. This is logistics. You're more trouble to tame than free. Whatever you need to tell yourself. But you made a choice to reduce suffering. That matters. The monks returned to their routine. Meditation, study, simple work maintaining the monastery. The soldiers guarding them found this deeply weird. They're just sitting there, reported one guard, 4 hours, days. They barely talk. They just sit and breathe. Are they planning something? I don't think so. I think they're actually just meditating. That's genuinely all they're doing. The problem for the Caltrian occupation was that the monks' presence was becoming a symbol. Other colonists saw these humans openly refusing to cooperate with the occupation, not violently, not getting themselves killed, just calmly declining to participate, and it was spreading. Other civilians started refusing registration, refusing to cooperate with occupation protocols, not fighting, just standing there and saying no. The Caltrian forces were trained for violent resistance. They had procedures for insurgencies, armed uprisings, terrorist attacks, but they had no procedure for civilians who just refused to cooperate, who stood there calmly, while you threatened them and said no, and you'll have to force me. Because forcing people created scenes, created martyrs, created images that spread across communication networks and made the occupation look brutal and desperate. Commander Zelkith called for reinforcements. We need more troops. The civilian resistance is spreading. Resistance? Are they armed? No. They're not fighting at all. They're just refusing, and we can't stop them without killing them. And if we kill unarmed civilians, this entire operation becomes a political disaster. High Command didn't understand. You have 300 soldiers. How are unarmed civilians a threat? They're not a threat. They're an impossibility. We can't force compliance without violence. And violence against non-violent civilians makes us look like monsters. Every move we make to control them makes the situation worse. 6 weeks into the occupation, Brother James received a visitor. Commander Zelkith came to the monastery alone. No guards. No weapons visible. He found James in the meditation hall. May I speak with you? Of course. Please sit. Zelkith sat, uncomfortable in the silence of the meditation space. I need to understand something. Why are you doing this? Living in a monastery and meditating, refusing to cooperate, making this difficult. What's your goal? Brother James considered the question. Our goal is to live according to our principles. We believe in nonviolence and the inherent worth of all beings, and refusing to participate in systems of oppression. The occupation is such a system. Therefore, we cannot cooperate with it. But you're not fighting us. Fighting would be participating in violence. We refuse that as well. So what do you want? For us to leave? That would be ideal. But I cannot control your choices. I can only control my own. I choose not to cooperate with violence. What you do with that choice is yours. You realize you can't win this way. We outnumber you, outgun you. We could kill everyone in this monastery, and there's nothing you could do to stop us. That's true. But then you'd have killed peaceful monks who never raised a hand against you. That would be murder. How would that serve your goals? It would remove an obstacle to occupation. Would it? Or would it create a symbol? Would it inspire more resistance? Would it make your soldiers question what they're doing here? James paused. Commander, violence is easy. Any species can destroy, can kill, can conquer. That's not strength. It's simplicity. True strength is choosing not to harm even when you could. That's what we're demonstrating. That sounds like weakness to me. Does it? Then why are you here? Alone, asking me these questions. If we were weak, you'd simply crush us and move on. But you can't, because what we're doing creates a problem you can't solve with violence. That's not weakness. That's power. Zelkith had no response to that. The resistance spread to other colonies. News of New Tibet's non-violent non-cooperation reached other occupied worlds. Civilians started using the same tactics, refusing registration, refusing to work in Caltrian facilities, just calmly declining to participate in occupation. The Caltrian military was trained for war, not this. Their soldiers were getting demoralized trying to force compliance from people who wouldn't fight back but also wouldn't cooperate. I feel like a bully. One soldier confessed to his squad leader. These people aren't threatening us. They're just existing. And we're threatening them with violence to make them do what we want. That's occupation. That's our job. But it feels wrong. They're not enemies. They're just people who want to be left alone. This sentiment was spreading through the ranks. Soldiers were questioning their orders, questioning the occupation, questioning whether forcing peaceful civilians to comply made them peacekeepers or oppressors. Morale collapsed over the following month. The Caltrian High Command sent investigators to New Tibet to understand what was happening. Why was a simple occupation falling apart? They interviewed Commander Zelkith. You have 300 soldiers. The monastery has 23 monks. Why haven't you secured compliance? Because they won't comply. And forcing them requires violence against unarmed civilians who aren't threatening anyone. Then use violence. That's what soldiers do. And create martyrs. Make heroes out of monks. Turn this occupation into a moral catastrophe that undermines everything we're trying to accomplish. You're overthinking this. No. I'm thinking about it for the first time. These humans, they're in OT fighting us. But they're defeating us anyway. By simply refusing to cooperate, by showing my soldiers that non-violence is an option, by making us question our own actions. The investigator didn't have a response. Because Zelkith was right. You couldn't defeat someone who refused to fight and wouldn't cooperate. You could kill them. But that just made the problem worse. 3 months into the occupation, High Command made a decision. Withdraw from New Tibet. The colony wasn't worth the political cost. The resistance was spreading. Morale was collapsing. They gained nothing and lost credibility. Brother James received the news while meditating. You've won, Commander Zelkith told him. We're withdrawing. You got what you wanted. I wanted nothing except to live according to my principles. But I'm glad the violence is ending. How did you do it? How did you defeat an army without fighting? Brother James smiled. We didn't defeat your army. We showed your soldiers who they were becoming. We held up a mirror. Fighting us would have been simple. But you couldn't fight us because we weren't fighting you. We were just being peaceful. And violence against peace reveals the violence for what it is. Unjustified, cruel, wrong. You made us feel like monsters. No. We simply didn't pretend that you weren't acting monstrously. We reflected back what was happening. You did the rest yourselves. I hate that I understand what you're saying. Understanding is the first step. You're a good person. Commander, you were following orders. But when those orders required you to harm peaceful people, you couldn't reconcile that with your own values. That conflict is what defeated your occupation. Not us, you. Zelkith was quiet for a long time. Then, what will you do now? The same thing we've always done. Meditate, study, live simply and non-violently. Perhaps with more appreciation for how powerful that choice can be. The withdrawal from New Tibet became a turning point. Other occupied colonies adopted non-violent resistance. The Caltrian Dominion found itself unable to maintain occupations against populations that simply refused to cooperate. They could have massacred entire planets, but that would have united the galaxy against them, would have destroyed any legitimacy they claimed, would have made them the monsters that Brother James had reflected back to Commander Zelkith. Within a year, the Caltrian Dominion withdrew from most of its occupied territories, not from military defeat, from moral exhaustion. Their soldiers couldn't continue oppressing people who wouldn't fight back. The galaxy took notice. Non-violent resistance became a studied discipline. Military academies taught it alongside conventional warfare. Philosophers debated its effectiveness. Politicians tried to understand its implications. Because Brother James had proven something terrifying to every military power in the galaxy. Violence could be made irrelevant. Power could be rendered meaningless, not through greater violence, through the absolute refusal to participate in it. 5 years after the occupation ended, Brother James was invited to speak at the Galactic Peace Institute. He almost declined. Public speaking wasn't part of his practice, but his fellow monks encouraged him. This was an opportunity to teach. He stood before an audience of thousands, diplomats, military leaders, academics, all waiting to hear from the monk who defeated an army. I didn't defeat anyone, he began. I simply refused to cooperate with violence. There's a difference. He spoke for an hour about the principles of nonviolence, about how strength wasn't the ability to harm, but the ability to refrain from harm, about how true power came from conviction, not coercion. Violence is easy, he said. Any species can destroy, can kill, can force others through threat or harm. That's not strength, it's simplicity. True strength is standing in front of armed enemies and refusing to harm them, even when they ray threatening to harm you. True power is making violence irrelevant through absolute moral conviction. The audience was silent. Many didn't understand. Some were angry. How dare this human suggest that military might wasn't strength? But others understood, particularly the soldiers who'd faced nonviolent resistance. They knew exactly what he meant, because they experienced the unique horror of being unable to defeat an enemy who wouldn't fight back. After the speech, Commander Zelkith approached him. They hadn't seen each other since the withdrawal. I resigned my commission, Zelkith said, after New Tibet. I couldn't continue serving an institution that required me to threaten peaceful people. I'm sorry if our actions caused you suffering. Don't be. You gave me clarity, showed me who I was becoming. I'm grateful for that. Well, you do now. I've been studying human philosophy, particularly the traditions of nonviolence. There's a depth there that my culture never developed. I want to learn more. Brother James smiled. You'd be welcome at the monastery if you ever want to study with us. I might take you up on that. 10 years after the occupation, New Tibet Monastery had expanded. Monks from 24 species now lived there. The human practice of contemplative nonviolence had spread. Other species were discovering that they too could choose this path. Brother James was older now, his hair gray, his movements slower, but his presence was as calm as ever. He sat in meditation with a new student, a young Caltrian who'd come to learn nonviolence, a member of the same species that had occupied New Tibet. Why did you choose this path? The student asked. I didn't choose it in a single moment. It was thousands of small choices. Each time I could have responded with anger or violence, I chose compassion and peace. Those choices accumulated, became who I am. But you defeated an army without fighting. That seems like more than accumulated choices. That was just one expression of a lifelong practice. The occupation gave me an opportunity to live my principles under extreme pressure. But the principles were already there. developed over decades of small, daily choices to be nonviolent. How do I develop that? Start with small things. When someone is rude, choose not to respond with rudeness. When you're angry, choose to breathe instead of lash out. When you see injustice, choose to resist peacefully instead of violently. These small choices build the capacity for larger ones, until one day, you can stand in front of armed soldiers and simply refuse to participate in violence, not from fear, from conviction. The young Caltrian considered this. It seems hard. It is. Nonviolence is much harder than violence. Violence is instinct. Nonviolence is discipline. That's why it's more powerful. Anyone can lash out. Few can restrain themselves. 20 years after the occupation, the Galactic Council passed the New Tibet Accords, a set of protocols for military occupation that prohibited violence against nonviolent resistance, recognized the legitimacy of peaceful non-cooperation, established that forcing compliance through violence against unarmed civilians was a war crime. The Accords fundamentally changed warfare, made occupation nearly impossible if the population chose nonviolent resistance, because the Accords gave legal backing to Brother James's simple principle: you can refuse to cooperate, and violence against the refusal is unjustified. Brother James didn't attend the signing ceremony. He was meditating in his monastery, as he did every day, but he felt the ripple of change, felt the galaxy shifting towards something slightly more compassionate, slightly more willing to choose peace. It wasn't complete. Violence still existed. War still happened. But now there was an alternative, a proven alternative. Nonviolent resistance wasn't just moral philosophy. It was practical tactics that worked. 30 years after the occupation, Brother James was dying. His body was failing, age and illness catching up to him. He lay in the monastery's infirmary, surrounded by his fellow monks. Commander Zelkith, now a teacher of nonviolent philosophy himself, came to say goodbye. "You changed the galaxy," Zelkith said. "You know that. I changed nothing. I just lived according to my principles. The galaxy changed itself because you showed us it was possible. Showed us that there was another way, that strength didn't require violence. Many others showed that before me. I was just one more example, but I'm glad the lesson spread. Do you have any regrets, brother?" James thought about his life, the decades of meditation, the confrontation with the occupation, the years teaching others about nonviolence. "I regret that I couldn't do more. That violence still exists, that people still choose harm over compassion. But I understand that change is slow, gradual. Each generation does what it can. I did what I could. You did more than most. I simply refused to cooperate with violence. That's all. Anyone could do the same. That's the point. This isn't about being exceptional. It's about making a choice every moment, every day. To be peaceful, to be nonviolent, to refuse to participate in harm." "Will you teach me one last thing?" Zelkith asked. "If I can." "How do you face death so calmly?" Brother James smiled. "The same way I faced the occupation, by accepting what is. Fighting reality creates suffering. Accepting it creates peace. I am dying. This is reality. Fighting it would only create suffering in my final moments. So I accept it and find peace." That's the lesson, isn't it? Acceptance. Non-resistance to reality, yes, but not passive acceptance. Active acceptance. Seeing reality clearly and choosing how to respond. I couldn't change the occupation, but I could choose not to cooperate with it. I can't change death, but I can choose to face it with peace. That's the practice. Seeing clearly and choosing wisely. Brother James died 3 days later, peacefully, surrounded by the community he'd built. They held a memorial service that was attended by thousands. People from across the galaxy who'd been touched by his example. Soldiers who'd put down their weapons after seeing non-violent resistance. Civilians who'd learned they could stand up to power without violence. Teachers who'd spread the practice of contemplative non-violence to new worlds. The memorial wasn't sad. It was celebratory. A life well lived. A practice fully embodied. a man who'd proven that you could stand against violence without becoming violent yourself. 50 years after the occupation, New Tibet Monastery was a pilgrimage site. People came from across the galaxy to walk where Brother James had walked, to sit where he'd meditated, to learn from the monks who continued his practice. The monastery had trained thousands of students in nonviolent resistance, had become a center for peace studies, had influenced policy across hundreds of worlds. But the monks who lived there kept their practice simple: meditation, contemplation, simple living. The same things Brother James had done before he became famous. Because the point wasn't to become famous or influential. The point was to live according to principles, to choose nonviolence every day, to show that it was possible. The galaxy was different now. Violence still existed. Wars still happened. But there was an alternative that was recognized and respected. Nonviolent resistance was taught alongside military strategy. Diplomatic solutions were pursued before military ones. Not everywhere, not perfectly, but more than before. Because Brother James had shown that one person, armed with nothing but conviction and compassion, could stand against an army and win, not through violence, through the absolute refusal to participate in it. He defeated 300 soldiers without raising a hand, and in doing so, had changed the way the galaxy thought about strength. Violence was easy, non-violence was hard, and the hard path was the stronger one. That was Brother James's legacy. Not a military victory, not a political triumph, just a simple demonstration that you could choose peace even when surrounded by violence. And that choice mattered. It changed individuals, changed communities, changed the galaxy. One refusal at a time, one peaceful stand at a time, one moment of choosing compassion over violence at a time. The galaxy would never forget the monk who defeated an army by simply refusing to cooperate with their violence, because he proved that the most powerful weapon wasn't the one that could cause the most harm. It was the will to cause no harm at all, even when harm was threatened against you, even when violence seemed like the only option, even when everyone said you had to fight. Brother James stood peacefully and said no. And the army couldn't defeat that, because how do you conquer someone who won't fight and won't cooperate? You can kill them, but that just proves their point, that proves the violence was unjustified all along. So you're left with a choice: continue the violence and become the monster, or walk away and admit that non-violence won. Commander Zelkith chose to walk away. His soldiers chose to walk away. The Caltrian Dominion chose to walk away. Not from military defeat, from moral defeat, from the realization that they couldn't justify their actions against people who were so clearly, absolutely peaceful. That was Brother James's victory, not military, moral. And it echoed across the galaxy for generations. In every occupied colony that chose nonviolent resistance, in every soldier who put down their weapon rather than harm peaceful civilians, in every diplomatic solution that was reached because someone chose to de-escalate rather than fight, Brother James's refusal to cooperate with violence had created space for others to make the same choice. And slowly, generation by generation, the galaxy became slightly more peaceful, slightly more willing to choose compassion, slightly more likely to look for alternatives to violence. Not perfect, never perfect, but better. Because one monk had shown it was possible, had defeated an army with nothing but conviction and peace.